Hello, everyone, and welcome to our December episode of the Lambert Connected Podcast High School Edition. This is Amanda Thrower, principal of Lambert High School, and we're excited to chat with you today about looking ahead to January and the course registration process at Lambert. When we return from the break, our families will be diving into that registration process for the 26-27 school year. And so before the busyness of the new year begins and that registration season hits, winter break offers a really good time, as your kids have wrapped up their midterms in a moment of calm, to think through and have some meaningful conversations with them about next year's classes. So today we want to jump in and explore how to help your student build a schedule that challenges them without overwhelming them, because balance is truly the foundation for both academic success and their overall well-being. And that's ultimately what we want for all of our Longhorns. So winter break's a great time to have these conversations with your student. Families finally have time together without the day-to-day pressure of the school day. And as I said, midterms have just wrapped up, and we know that the midterm week and season is among the most stressful for our students. We're seeing them in that right now as we record this. Students often feel stress when they come back in January to make these decisions, and so having those conversations now can help hedge some of that off. They'll start to have conversations that draw comparisons with other students. This is a time to just talk about them and their needs as your child. And then starting discussions now creates clarity and confidence so that they're not feeling rushed in making these choices. So we urge you to start having the conversations now with the gift of a clear head before that decision time comes in January. So we want to give you the tools to have those conversations and to make those decisions with your student. So I first want to turn the mic over to Mrs. Parker. She is one of our APs who works directly with building our master schedule and the registration process. And she's going to give kind of an overview of what that will look like and what you can expect. Ms. Parker, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Thrower. So what we really want all of our students and families to know is that this registration process happens in phases. So once they come back in January, the first phase will be the core recommendation window. And at that point, the teachers and the students will be having conversations about what the teachers recommend for the students' core classes for the next year. So that's the very first kind of, specific phase that opens. We have a lot of resources that the students can utilize at this time. So if families go to the registration website, they can download their grade-specific kind of registration packets and worksheets for the next year. So that will give families a little bit better idea of where the students currently are and where they can go. So definitely kind of looking through that information, downloading that, so that when the teachers and the students have those conversations, everybody kind of understands what that looks like for each individual student, because it may be different from student to student. So after the teacher recommendation window, the next phase of the process is the elective selection window. So this is where students can go in and make all of those offerings or choice offerings for the classes that they really get to choose to take. A lot of our core classes, students have to take certain classes, but the electives gives them the freedom to choose some of the other things that they might be interested in. So that phase will be, next after the teacher recommendation window closes. Within that same phase is when students can go in and fill out the course change request form. So if they've made a decision, but then, want to make a change to that, this is the time to do that. It's a very short window, and we know that students have to make all these decisions in January, but that course change request form gives them kind of that opportunity to look at what they've been recommended for and to, think about what electives they would like, and that's their opportunity to tell us, how they would like to do that. That's going to include, if they're taking classes online, FEA, GABs, things like that. Like all of that happens in this second window of time. Students also during this time can access, again, all of our resources. There's going to be lots of opportunities for them to reach out to the counselors. The counselors will be set up. They can easily ask questions about their schedule. We also have Q&A sessions, virtual Q&A sessions for families. So there's lots of opportunities for students and families to reach out, ask questions, see what works specifically for them. And then all of these decisions have to be made by the end of January. So there is a very firm deadline on when all of this has to happen, which is why it's so important for families to think about what is right for their student, and that we can, figure all that out in January. These decisions around some of the advanced classes, whether your student's going to take AP or honors or dual enrollment, any other, course offerings, it's really, really important that during this time, they pick something that really works for them, because these decisions do stay, for their whole year the next year. And I know it's hard to try and think about that here in January, like we've just finished a holiday break. We're coming back, but it's already time to think about next year. So it's really important that families and students talk about what that looks like for them. And also to listen to what the teachers are recommending for them during that teacher recommendation window, because they really are the experts. They know what the requirements are for their class, and also what that looks like for the classes the students are heading into. So we really want to lean into, what the teachers are recommending students for, but students do have an option, and that's where all of these resources and all of these conversations are super important for families.
And let me just provide some feedback around, the timeline, because I know, like Ms. Parker said, this seems really early to be making these decisions. And as Ms. Parker also iterated, these decisions stick. And let me explain why. First, the timeline. The reason we hold course registration in January is because all of the choices your students are going to make during that registration timeline informs our staffing needs for the 26-27 school year. And my job as a principal, one of the many things I aim to do is put the absolute best educators in front of your children every day. And so we want to head into the staffing season knowing our needs and early on being able to recruit the best educators out there. And other districts start having those job fairs in early February. So that's a big part of why we do this process when we do it, is so that we know our staffing needs. We can build a master schedule based off of what your students have requested during the registration process. And that's also why their decisions have to stick, because once they've made a decision and we build a master schedule for, over 3,200 students around those decisions, we can't be making, wholesale changes, because we have staffed our building and built the schedule for the year based on these choices. So that, I just wanted to give context to the timeline for what it is, why it is when it is, and then also why it's so important that you get those decisions right during this window, and why we can't make big changes after the fact. I also want to stress, because I know that there's a lot of myths out there about what colleges are looking for, and I see the pressure that is putting on our students just to overschedule themselves. So I want to be really clear that taking every advanced class available is not the golden ticket. What colleges are looking for students, from students, is that they are challenging themselves in a way that makes sense, not for students who are stretched so thin that they can't thrive. So, for instance, they want to see that your student is strategically adding rigor in the areas that make sense based on a major that they are thinking of pursuing. So I'll give you an example. My daughter she's a senior this year. We just went through the early application process for the University of Georgia. University of Georgia receives more Lambert early action applicants than any other high school. We had 371 apply for early action. 200 of those were admitted, and many of the rest are waiting to hear in March and have been deferred to the regular decision timeline. my daughter was one of that fortunate 200 that did get in early action, but I will tell you, she is not a kid who has extended herself and taking every AP course available, every dual enrollment. She had a very balanced approach to her transcript, and her transcript really reflected the career path she aims to head into post college and the major she indicated on her application to UGA. I've been fortunate to have conversation with David Graves, the admissions director at UGA. We've had some really great conversations around this balance piece, and I've been able to share how stressed our students are and how competitive it is at Lambert for those spots at the University of Georgia. And if you follow them on their social media, I was really encouraged to see the stats that they put out around this early admission class that they just accepted. If you'll notice on that graphic, and I encourage you to look at it, what they are really highlighting is the overall experience of our students. So they're looking at leadership opportunities. They're looking at volunteer service hours. They're looking at athletics teams that they've been a part of. Very minimal on their graphic this year. It's still on there, but it was a lot smaller than these other pieces, were the GPA, the SAT score, the ACT score. So we know that those are important, data points that are on a student's application. But we urge you, as you're making this decision around their schedule, to look for balance, because that is how our students thrive, and ultimately that is what our colleges are looking for, are well-rounded individuals, not those who have just kind of sold out and thrown themselves into a schedule that just doesn't really make sense. I want to, at this point, transition the mic over to one of our counselors, Coach Church, who's going to offer some feedback on some signs to look for in understanding what is an overloaded schedule.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Thrower. My name is Coach Church. I'm one of the counselors here. Just to reiterate, this season is very stressful for everybody. Midterms are coming up, and then with the course registration process, it can be very overwhelming at times. And so please, we are always here for you guys in the counseling department. But for you guys as parents, right, some of the things of an overload schedule to look for are changes in those patterns that are normal for your kid. Things like chronic tiredness, things like loss of interest in hobbies. So I was just talking to a student the other day who mentioned not wanting to go to his sporting practice after school. And as a coach myself, that kind of broke my heart. I was like, buddy, you got to go. You got to go to this, right? So just, lack of interest in things that normally make them happy. Regular late nights, right? When we go into classroom guidance, I always ask the question, raise your hand if you went to bed past midnight. I usually get about 50% of the class will raise their hand. And that's not healthy, right? Your brain develops when you're asleep. That's science. I'm not a scientist, but that's science. Those late nights. So if you're staying up working, and it kind of goes back to what Ms. Parker was saying about balance. A lot of those kids, a lot of our students are staying up late night because they're working on 5, 6, even 7 sometimes AP classes. And it's just not healthy. It's not something that needs to happen as much as our students and you as parents might feel like it does need to happen in a school like this. Increased anxiety and then dreading school, right? A lot of these things will rear their head in the form of school avoidance, where I don't want to get out of bed today. I don't want to go to school. I've got a test today. Mom, can you write me a sick note so I don't have to go and take this test? I'm not prepared. We have a lot of kids who will call out of school on days that they have tests because they didn't study enough because they were studying for another test that they had, and they've got 2 or 3 tests on a single day. So those are some things that you can look for as a parent, and really just those changes in habits that are abnormal. So,
Coach Church, can you give our families maybe some guiding questions that they could use with their students as they start to have conversations about building their schedule for the 26-27 school year?
Yeah, I think, the first and foremost one I would ask is, why are you making the decisions you're making? Are you making it for you? Are you making it to please somebody else? Are you making it because your friends are doing something and you feel like you have to keep up? Those are all very real feelings that your kids are having, and I know that you parents are having, because you guys all, you guys are, as parents, are hearing it from each other as well. That'd be the first one I ask. Who are you doing this for? And if the answer to that question is anything other than I'm doing it for myself, that needs to be reflected upon. Because, I tell my kids, and I have the sign, it's in my office, it says comparison is the thief of joy, right? And this place, it's very, 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 very easy to compare yourself to what everybody else is doing. And this course registration period is a time where we see a lot of that. And so ask yourself that, like, hey, why am I going against my teacher recommendation for 10th literature on level to go into 10th literature honors, for example? Another thing I would ask is, like, what classes energize you, right? I was not a science guy. So trying to take a honors level science class just gave me the heebie-jeebies, okay? Same with writing. I threw commas everywhere. I couldn't write. Reading was one of my least favorite things to do in this world, still is. So, like, those classes didn't bring me joy. They didn't energize me. And so when I was in those classes, if I was trying to overextend myself in a class in a subject like that, it just didn't vibe. It didn't work. And I found myself really trying to put forth more effort than I needed to for not really a lot of good results. So, like, ask yourself that, hey, am I a math kid? Am I a science kid? Am I an English kid? Do I love history? Do I really love the fine arts? Is doing the theater production and doing 3 theater productions a year, is that going to give me so much juice? Because if it is, you're going to be spending a lot of time in the theater, and we love that. Junie B. Jones was fantastic. Shout out to our theater department. Make sure that you're focusing on the things that energize you. How much time do you spend nightly on homework? I go back to that midnight question. If you're up past midnight doing homework, take a chill pill on that. Maybe let's look at taking a step back in certain places. What extracurriculars or commitments do you want to continue, or do you want to start, right? Maybe you are a student who has been here for a couple years and you're a rising junior, and maybe you went to go see Junie B. Jones and you're like, oh my God, that looked so cool. I want to do that next year. How do I fit that into my schedule? How do I take a step back somewhere so that I can provide myself time to do the things that I think are going to be important to me? And that kind of touches on what Ms. Thrower was talking about with our college admissions, where they're looking more holistically at students as opposed to just a number on a paper. Do you want more room next year for sleep, right? Do you want more room? Maybe you find yourself in a position financially where the thought of affording college is overwhelming and scary, and you need to get a job to try and help, pay for that. Or maybe you find yourself in a position where you want to buy yourself an Xbox 5. But, like, those types of things, you want to provide yourself more time to do that. So those are all some very questions that you want to ask yourself. But again, I'll go back to who are you doing this for, right? Are you doing this for yourself, or are you doing it to keep up with a reality that has been told to you that really is just not true?
The point about jobs is another great point, Coach Church, and that was one of the things that UGA highlighted, was the number of jobs that these early admins had held, because holding down a job as a teenager obviously reflects being able to have some good skill sets that they're looking for. So I'm glad that you brought that up as well.
Yeah, they've always said, like, they want to see you be able to balance time commitments, because when you're a college student, that's all you're doing is balancing time commitments. And so if you can prove in your application that you've had that ability and you have that skill set, like you said, it means the world to them. And you don't learn those abilities by sitting in your room doing homework until 12:30 at night.
And just to jump in real quick, I want our families and our students to know at home that we're making these decisions for our own children too. So we're not just, sitting here as educators assistant principal, counselors, giving advice. We're actually living through it. So these are very real conversations that we're having at home. I have a rising sophomore, so we're about to have these same exact conversations. And that is one of them. Like, is he going to get a job? He's interested in history much more than some of the other subjects. So is that where we're going to pick up maybe one AP class, and keep that balance? Because if he does want to get a job, then we're definitely not piling on 2 and 3 APs, even though he's capable.
Great points, everybody. Finally, Coach Church, can you tell us, in your years and experience of being a counselor here at Lambert, what would you say is kind of the sweet spot as students look to create a balanced schedule?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to discourage kids from challenging themselves if they want to challenge themselves, right? I've worked here. This is my 9th year here, and this place has brilliant individuals in every aspect of academia. So schools, sports, fine arts. We've got a girl who's a world-renowned archer here this year. I mean, it's so you want to challenge yourself in a couple of areas, I think, but you also want to have a strong foundation in core classes, right? I think when you look at the college admissions process, they're looking at kind of that core, that core value, that core foundation. And then you want to take electives that are going to spark curiosity, right? You want to do things that are fun for you, because it can be a break in your day. We're right now in this room, we've got a student who is one of our audio and video tech students in internship, and he has been lovely enough to grace us with his presence to record this podcast and edit it. Correct. Like that comment just there. No, I'm kidding. But he is getting a lot of value out of this experience through one of our CTAE pathways. And it's sparking something that hopefully he continues throughout the next phase of his life. And I think those are the types of things that you really want to try and give yourself the ability to focus on. And if you get out of those things to take a advanced level class in something else, again, because you think that you have to, or you think that you're not going to achieve some level of, whatever it may be, if you don't do it, I encourage you to take a second look at that and come and have a conversation with me. I'd love to talk to you about it. And I think one of the things too is you want to give yourself the ability to find balance in your relationships in your life, right? So giving yourself an opportunity to go and eat dinner at the dinner table with your family at night, or go to a sporting event to support your friend who's playing basketball, or go to a concert, or go to a football game to watch your friend who's in the marching band perform at halftime. Give yourself the opportunity to go out to the movie theater with your friends and not worry about, oh my gosh, I've got to study for this test. You should be able to be present in the relationships that you have. And I think that's a really important piece as well.
So as Ms. Parker pointed out, particularly for her and I know Coach Church is a little behind us. His kids will be here before he knows it, but we are living this as parents with the age of our children and making these decisions. We also are experts on it, as an assistant principal, counselor, and principal who live and breathe teenagers every day. We love them and we've dedicated our careers to them. But if that's also not enough for you, all of this is rooted in significant research. One guiding text that our district has used, particularly as we've tackled cell phones and personal devices and screen time, is a text called The Anxious Generation, written by Jonathan Haidt. And he describes what he calls the 4 foundational harms that today's teens face. These are shifts in childhood that have increased anxiety and reduced resilience. And we see that. We live that every day at Lambert High School. So while he's talking about cultural and technological changes rather than course registration, the themes certainly apply directly to how we think about our students' schedules. So number one of these 4 foundational harms is that childhood has become more sedentary. Haidt describes how kids today move far less than any previous generation. Physical activity that was once kind of baked into our childhood is now something students have to consciously schedule. And so if we pack students with high rigor classes and leave no time for athletics, movement, or simple outdoor time, we unintentionally reinforce a sedentary lifestyle that contributes to stress and dysregulation. Number 2, childhood has become more solitary. Haidt argues that the decline in face-to-face play and increase in digital interaction leaves young people lonelier and more isolated, even when they seem socially connected online. So a schedule overloaded with AP courses or honors, dual enrollment that can squeeze out social time should not be seen as a luxury. It's a developmental need. Real friendships, like Coach Church was talking about, and unstructured time help buffer stress and support mental health. And number 3, childhood has become more virtual. So a key harm Haidt identifies is that much of teens' interaction now happens through screens rather than the physical world, shifting how they learn, solve problems, and form their identity. When students are exhausted from academic overload, they default to passive downtime, usually just scrolling rather than real experiences. And a balanced schedule will leave time for energy for real-world engagement rather than retreat. Also, don't underestimate the value of electives and creative classes. Those courses build skills like communication, collaboration, and creativity, which employers and colleges will tell you are invaluable to success. These classes also offer emotional and mental outlets for our students. They enhance college applications, do not take away from them. They provide unique experiences, as Coach Church spoke about. And honestly, this is where our students really find that connectivity to a large school like Lambert. And then lastly, think about a whole week with that schedule. Map it out. Lay out what you're thinking about as a possible schedule and estimate the weekly workload. And ask yourself, does it fit? Or does it squeeze out all these other things that we're talking about that create a balanced life for your student? So as a parent, here are some phrases that I've used with my own children that can help build confidence. Challenge is good, but exhaustion is not a requirement for success. Also reminding them you don't have to prove anything through your schedule. And let's choose classes that help you grow, but also help you stay healthy. To wrap everything up, we just want to remind you that high school is important, and so is being a teenager. The goal is not to fill every spot with rigor. It's to build a schedule that helps your student learn, grow, and still have time for sleep, play, connection, and enjoyment of life. Over winter break, please use this time to pause, to dream, reflect, and build a plan that supports both academic challenge and personal well-being. Balance is not a compromise. It's a strategy for long-term success. And just as a reminder, we will be putting out installments on our Lambert Connected podcast, this YouTube channel, pretty regularly. We have more coming in the spring semester, so be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. We love you, Longhorns. We hope everybody has a great break and that you do have time to pause, to rest, relax, and enjoy this time with your loved ones.